start with introduction. Marty and Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Marty Caplan. I have a consultancy called Fabulationary. I am a product production and design guy, 30 years in the industry, been in a lot of different spots, and now I'm up here in the spotlight.
You deserve it.
Thanks, Matt. Take it away.
Right. Hey, everyone. Matt Marcou, about 17 years in the games industry. I'm a kind of a jack of all trades. Mostly work in general management now, but I've held roles in production, marketing, strategic initiatives at companies such as Riot Games on League of Legends and EA Sports on Madden NFL. So happy to not only share those experiences in AAA game making, whatever that means these days, but I started a consultancy 3 years ago, Try Hard Consulting, where we consult. Thank you. Someone's trying really hard there. But we specialize right now not only in connecting brands into the industry, but also working with indie and AA developers. And so I've had quite a few encounters, experiences with the topic of user-generated content.
Wonderful, thank you. Before we get into the topic of the day, I wanted to give you guys an overview of what Tipalti is. For those who are not aware, Tipalti, we've been around 14 plus years. We started off, our flagship product is Mass Payments, which is our scalable global payouts platform to help businesses, particularly gamers, to pay their developers or creators at scale globally. So that's been our flagship product. As you can see, we work from games that are in the early stages all the way to those that have scaled to enterprise levels like Roblox or Discord, Activision. In a nutshell, if I have to summarize, basically, we take away all the hassle in terms of payments, whether it is paying globally, taxes, compliance. All of that is part of Tipalti's infrastructure. That way you can focus on building great gaming experiences. So that's in a nutshell if I have to summarize what we do. A lot more information down at the booth. So with that, let's kick off the UGC panel. And before we go deeper, I would love to get your thoughts, Marty, starting with you, and then Matt, on the macro trends that we see in the market. Particularly, like, what are some of the big things that you are seeing, and what are the drivers that are driving the change?
I mean, in games, it's been the case for a long time that everybody wants to get into games, and it's never been easier. And so I think a big macro trend that supports everything we're going to talk about tonight is how everybody wants to make games, and now everybody kind of can. And you can even build games that are all about letting people do that, and that turns out to be an amazing strategy for almost every metric you can measure a game by. Things like being able to be a streamer and play a game and get an audience, to being able to use AI tools to make stuff for games, have games give you mod tools that are more advanced than they're basically the same tools that the game team used to make the game, right? Usually at the end of a really popular game's life cycle, they hand those to the audience, and then it has a whole nother lifetime. I mean, Baldur's Gate, for instance. And so I think that's the major trend. Like, how do you lean in to making games that let people make games? So that's kind of a key trend, I think. And being able to create an ecosystem around that where either you have fans or the game have fans or you both have fans and you're all making things together and participating in this sort of creative explosion that I think is one of the main very exciting trends that feeds right into what Tipalti is doing in so many dimensions. And so, since y'all are game developers for the most part, like, what do you do with this trend? How do you surf it, right? That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that's a great starting point for a lot of folks, place where folks are. And in a way, this trend is cyclical. So part of how I got into the business was really through the modding community. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but my pastimes are games like Half-Life and Warcraft 3. And thank you, yeah. And amazing titles came out of the mod community. From Half-Life came Counter-Strike. From Warcraft 3 came Dota, League of Legends, pick your flavor. That used to be a really heated topic. I don't know how much it is anymore. I didn't hear much cheering there. So, but I mean, it's coming back around. But to Marty's point, it was really tough to mod back then, right? You needed to be like really into it, dozens of hours of work, unpaid labor. It was tough business. It's coming around again in an easier way. And I'm just to quote some stats. I swear I didn't let AI write my speech or anything here, but because we couldn't fix the Wi-Fi and get some stats up here, just a taste of like where this is leading. So Roblox is something a customer Tipalti, as they mentioned. So macro UGC for game development is believed to be a $10 billion market right now. And that's just in-game content, I believe. Roblox being responsible for about 1.5 billion of that. Roblox having 70 million monthly active users, making them larger than PlayStation, Xbox. And it was estimated that recently 70% of US gamers aged 9 to 12 had played Roblox. So that's the environment. Again, I'm dating myself, but I hear some groans in the crowd. You look younger than I am. But those are the experiences that this new generation of gamers are coming up, right? They're coming up in the same way that I came up through modding, Counter-Strike, Warcraft 3. They're coming up in this different world. So there's an expectation there, and there's actually, for those who are entrepreneurial, which it's easier than ever, they're thinking, well, how can I contribute? I'm a fan. I'd love to make things. And so, yeah, that's I would say that's a fair summary. And then again, from a game making perspective, I'm going to play the, evil employer here, but obviously if you can save more money, right, you can invest that in doing cooler stuff. But a driver of this really is reducing development costs, getting faster content and more relevant content, right? Because it's like those American Express commercials. Like you want to be treated by someone who's also a gamer and who can think like, what can I make to be cool for other gamers? And so UGC enables the best environment for that. But it is tough. It is a tough business.
And the reason it's tough, right, is the incredible amount that there is. So discovery has become an even more challenging hill to kind of climb and be able to get noticed, right? And that feeds into this community piece, because always and forever, word of mouth will be the best possible way to get your game into people's hands, right? Your friend recommends it. Well, if you build making parts of the game into the core game loop, so to play the game is to make the game, that becomes a strategy that has been successful in a lot of different ways. You can see, sort of big folks who have pivoted into that, like, Fortnite and your Robloxes, but it also is effective for smaller teams and smaller groups that are even ad hoc assembled. And just to bring it back to Tipalti, I was literally talking to some like early 20-something Roblox developers. They're totally independent. They're on like 5 teams that are around the world, and they make their living by like this one gal's making clothes, and she gets paid by Tipalti. Like that's how she pays her rent. It's really amazing to see. I mean, that's just mind-boggling from like coming from early game dev days when you were just like, can we even buy a computer? Like it's too expensive. This hard drive is like $500.
We were running bake sales back then, actually, still.
I think wonderful points, particularly on standing out with content in this crowded marketplace. Challenges you mentioned about. I wonder if these things are different based on the life cycle of the game. So like we have, I don't know, it's hard to see it here, but early stage growth and at scale. So I wonder if the trends and the challenges differ depending on where you are in the phase.
It's definitely different, of course, like just from the standpoint of being small and then growing large. Creating, as a production guy, I've been, growing teams from 1 to 3 people to about 200 people for many years, and creating a roadmap that takes you from that small, initial success and creative success and taking it into something that becomes a worldwide whirlwind. Yeah, I think probably the biggest game that I ever worked on was Words with Friends, right? I mean, that started as just a way to play Scrabble with your grandma, and then it's 7 million people a day now. It's crazy. And that's a really good example of how do you put features around a basic creating, your words. You share your words. You're playing with points. You have systems, lots of different interesting things that a team planned a roadmap and then tested against the audience that got bigger and bigger and bigger because the features they were choosing were successful, engaging, retained, and monetized. So yeah, I mean, the secret to success there is to have a plan, iterate, and test. I don't think there's anything than that is, that's right in the core.
And I'll stick on the dev track, but I definitely maybe the next question we'll talk a little bit more of non-development applications of UGC, which are still valuable for getting your product in the hands of gamers. But I've had clients who. How do I say it? It is a tough decision for UGC because the problem when you're a small company is you're building tools for other gamers. So you're effectively, in the same way your engineers are building tools for your own team, or sometimes those engineers are also designers because that's just the budget you're on. There is a tough decision to make based on your runway around how much you want to lead into the development side of UGC. I know I've had clients, been clients of Tipalti as well, raise multi-$10 million with the aspirations of implementing UGC, but having to put that on the back burner to focus on the core game product. So on the development side, it is tough to scale. It can be an expensive endeavor. I regularly, people often come up to me and say, well, do it like Fortnite. Like, why don't just copy Fortnite, build that engine, etc. And I point out to people that, Unreal was they were known for being game development engine experts, and even they spent 4 to 5 years perfecting the infrastructure around Fortnite, independently of designing the game Fortnite, to even get that ready for the market trend that occurred. So these are not easy things to predict and roadmap for. It does cost a lot of money, and I do want to flag there are ways maybe to piecemeal or break up aspects of UGC, and usually the easiest, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but usually the easiest part of that is kind of through marketing and community building, but I definitely want to keep the train going here on development.
Yep.
I think that's a great segue into zooming in into I would love to focus on the early stage, right? And what are some of the use cases for UGC, particularly for the early stage gaming companies? I mean, I'm almost thinking all the way from product, engagement, marketing, community, across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll start here because this is, in working on esports initiatives, influencer initiatives, in-game branding initiatives. Again, that still can have tech components, but the earliest use case I've actually seen is, crowdsourcing or giving your avid fans quests or reasons to create content for you. So a mutual client of mine and Tipalti's that uses their platform is a company called Shrapnel. They, within a year, brought over 300,000 followers to their various socials through a largely UGC quest-based influencer program. And so I think it can also be, before you work up to building development tools, maybe a good first step is testing the general creativity of your community, early followers, friends and family, saying, hey, for non-technical folks, just broad idea folks, when you think of our product, you think of where we're going with this game, what are other inspirations you have around music, art, podcasts, hangouts in Discord? What are some early ways you're inspired by the product that you want to manifest? You want to show the fun in a different way than developing a game or developing a piece of content, which is just slightly more difficult.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have an example where this company Bashcast has a card game, and it's all about friends getting together and making a card game about their in-jokes. So it's like built in, right, to the core game. So every feature you're going to make is going to support that, because otherwise the game wouldn't exist at all. And, people can even make like a whole pack of cards that's based on all of their insights, in jokes, and funny shit that they think is great with their friends, and sell it on a marketplace. So they had to invest into the sort of UI and flow, so that people could like make the cards with prompts and that kind of thing. It wasn't too expensive because it's all like cards. It's 2D. It's not that crazy. They did want to invest in the marketplace, because once you get to the point where people can start making things for fun in the game and then sell that, huge driver of the development. And their DAUs took off, right? Now that's just one way to go, but that's an example of like, how are you going to put the UGC in the center of your game so that it becomes an effective driver of your audience?
And one other ad that, again, hopefully doesn't sound too convoluted, but it's actually one of the first things I recommend. So, whether or not you're, a fan of like esports or competition, one of the early use cases for it, way before you're throwing, $1 million prize pools, it's like literally putting something up for stake. And, what I've recommended to game teams early on is you'd be amazed like how many bugs, glitches, creative ways of playing the game emerge when you're playing for stakes. Like when it really matters, beyond just simple fun. I mean, it should be fun obviously as well, but putting down $20 or like really igniting people's competitive spirits in community-based tournaments, especially when you record it, kind of leads to a lot of revelations of how your game can be played at the highest level, or when people are getting greedy. So again, $500 out there for a prize pool can go a long way into learning what your game is really about. And again, that's actually the primary use case I have for Tipalti right now is funding community tournaments and making it easy prize payouts. So I worry more about focusing on what they're doing and not so much about, okay, the cleanup and administration after all of this.
Cool.
That's great. Given these are early stage companies, how do they think about budgets and moderation of content? Like, I would think the budget would be a big concern. So is there a way they can experiment into this before, a big cash investment?
Yeah, I think that reusing assets that you're making already is like a very efficient way to, and by reusing I mean exposing them to the players and kind of giving them to the players to play with and make things with. Even if it's just for the social kind of expression, or creating a dynamic where people in your community are used to taking assets that are in the game and remixing them. That's a big trend in and around everything right now anyway. So leaning into that is a way to do that in a really cheap way, because it basically is all about the stuff you're doing already, and then letting them take some subset of your assets, because it's always an interesting question to be like, well, what's unique to our game that we're doing as our team, and what are we gonna let the community go play with? But there are lots of examples there, but I'm gonna date myself even worse and talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons has the OCR or ORC. It's basically a license that lets people homebrew stuff. So if you're gonna like come up with a strategy to get a bunch of people who are playing your game to make stuff up with your game, have some interesting pitch to them, and here's the asset package, and we want to see you do this with it, but challenge them to go out there and do weird stuff too, because that's what's get attention too.
And although I don't let AI write my speeches, I'm a terrible artist. Like, I have a lot of ideas, but in terms of drawing or going beyond stick figures, not for me. But my advice is, I think it's also with your community. It is a way to kind of open up creativity and experimentation with AI. I'm not a lawyer, but the advice I will give from other lawyers is, when it comes to your secret sauce, like, obviously don't, unless you have a proprietary kind of AI repository, don't load your key art, key character art into that. However, when it comes to like remixing, what a tree looks like or a background looks like, stuff that is more common and not something you necessarily want to have fill up your pipeline. I think that is a way on a budget to experiment and feed in some data, and whether it's used to inspire the community or whether you encourage your community to use AI. I think that's a little bit of a safe bet to see what comes out of it. But then if you find something that works, I would say invest more of your own resources and ownership of the IP from that.
What are some of the metrics you look at to know if it's working or not in terms of content?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be looking at all kinds of engagement metrics on socials. So if people are posting things and active in your Discord, if Discord membership is growing, if that's kind of where you're locating your community. Obviously on social media and reposts, reacts, that kind of thing to any content that somebody's taking and remixing into their sort of followers and their sphere, where they're saying something clever or making a meme or something like that. Being able to see and track that kind of growth in your socials is a key thing. Let's see, what other cool things? Number of downloads of the assets you're providing.
I mean, it's how are people engaging with it? Really, there's numerous ways to measure engagement. I think every company knows their own secret sauce. I think the way I like to kind of remix and challenge is obviously you don't just want to build an echo chamber. You want to build your products to reach the largest TAM, total addressable market possible. And so, but at the same time, it's an interesting paradox, because you want to type yourself, you want to be unique, but you don't want to be so singular that you're really only there for the chorus of core gamers. So I like to do testing where, put something in a small group of people, see what they come up with, and then expose that bigger, and then see where that gets you, and then do it again with a small group of people, expose it bigger, and really A/B split test those kind of concepts to see what is doing well. Because I also too see developers get in the trap of like, well, the numbers went up. This went up from 50 to 60, and it's like, well, that's good, yeah, but you wanted to go up from like 50 to like 5,000, right? You want to, depending on the scale and what you're aiming to achieve, like. You may want to see exponential growth, and not just like, oh, it went up by 10, it must be the better decision.
Right. I mean, depending on the goals, what is the right benchmark to follow? Switching to businesses or the gaming that are at the inflection point of scaling. So what are some of the considerations in terms of the underlying infrastructure, the monetization models that they may want to think about as they're going from a growth phase to a scale phase?
Yeah, this is an important one, because you're essentially, as a game developer with a small game and that is growing, you got some promising stuff, you need to prepare for success. Because if you blow it, then it's just a bad, I've seen so many times, people like get out of soft launch, they got a great thing going, and then, they can't scale because either planning around servers, or there's an optimization problem with especially in around back end. So from a technical standpoint, that's something to make sure you're sort of prepped for. Use your community to really stress test things. The Runeverse, which is a Forgotten Runes Wizard cult project, is doing a great job of this, where they're doing crash our universe promotions, and they make sure that they are stress testing all of their game stuff as they get ready to go out of soft launch into the bigger launch, and every indication shows that they'll be successful at that. But then another key thing to talk about here is really think about your monetization. What happens if you do get that big amount of money, right? People trying to do a lot of charges at the same time. How do you deal with fraud? How do you do all kinds of things in and around, transferring money to your bank account, having people make money off of your marketplace if you have one, and how you scale it? Well, we're here with our amazing sponsor, and they handle pretty much all of that. And so that's why coming in early, adopting and using an SDK like Tipalti is something you definitely should think about as you sort of prepare for the success that you really want. If you're having promising prototyping, and you're starting to think about going to the next stage and making your vertical slice and going into sort of early alpha, you should start to think about investing in your success so that when things really hit and they start to scale up in terms of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people hitting your game, that's something that you should keep in mind as a CEO, as a engineering leader, somebody who's doing planning and project management or production.
Yeah, I was going to say, even from the marketing content angle, I had a client recently, they were fielding submissions from people in their community around their personality and content, and they reached, I think it was 140,000 submissions. Very good problem to have, but then they were like, well, wait a minute, we have to review these. And it was like, well, okay, luckily you have it in a database, there's things to sort on, don't worry. But, I mean, you can also crowdsource your community to sort and vote on things. So, there's nothing, I mean, that's been going on for a while. But, yeah, thinking about scale, whether it is in development, which is, I think, a harder problem, but not overloading your marketers around, well, we have these submissions, we have this cool content, how are we actually going to effectively review it? And, like I said, I think thinking through how to crowdsource that or filter that out, making sure someone is actually thinking about, well, if this goes well, what is it going to mean? And then, think of a case, well, what if it goes 10x better than we thought it would? What would we actually do to handle it? So thankfully, that's a good problem to have, and probably means you're making some money on the back end to support that. But I've seen a lot of small companies have those good problems and not know how to field them.
Yeah, and it kind of works in reverse too when you do that thought experiment, right? Like, what happens if we do go this big? Well, that can actually feed back into your thinking about your features and prioritizing them. It can think about like how are you bug detecting and fixing? How are you relating with what messaging are you going to use to your community when things are starting to go either south or really good north, right? Like all that kind of stuff is like part of the planning, because you never know when it's actually gonna like hit, and so being prepared is 90% of being successful.
That's great. One last follow-up into this is, you mentioned that developers need to start thinking about this not when they are at scale, but much sooner. You mentioned alpha. Can you talk a little bit about what are the consequences of not making the timing right?
I mean, you see them play out so the consequences of not planning for scaling soon enough is usually in and around the game doesn't work and everyone runs away from it, which is bad. And you sort of become a victim of your own success. But it doesn't take a lot to at least have messaging around that, because it's like, even if you don't quite have the engineering bandwidth or you don't have the money to pay for servers, like think about costs going up and how you're going to handle that. It becomes a problem if you go from 100x to 1000x of people. All of a sudden, that month's server bill is going to be a lot bigger. What if you can't do that? Well, maybe you need to make sure to message to the community like, hey, it's amazing, you guys are making us successful. We are going to have some stability problems here, and message around that in a way that is getting them to help you, where you're basically like making sure they understand why things are happening and don't desert you because you're being a jerk by making their game crash.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both, Marty, Matt. This was a wonderful conversation.